A single iron key hung from the blacksmith's belt, but it could unlock every door in the village. How did medieval locksmiths create perfect keys without ever seeing the locks they were meant to open? And when a key failed, who paid the price for a door that would never open again? Medieval locks weren't just about keeping thieves out. They were statements of wealth, symbols of trust, and sometimes instruments of political power. A nobleman's strongbox, a merchant's guild hall, a monastery's treasury, each required a lock so precise that only one key in the world could open it. But here's what seems impossible. The locksmith who forged that key often worked miles away from the lock itself, relying on nothing more than wax impressions, careful measurements, and decades of hard-won skill. In medieval towns, becoming a locksmith meant joining one of the most secretive and regulated guilds. The Worshipful Company of Blacksmiths in London, established in the 14th century, didn't just control who could work iron. They controlled who could touch the mysteries of locks and keys. Guild regulations required 7 years of apprenticeship before a young man could even handle the specialized tools needed for lockwork. Master locksmiths guarded their techniques like state secrets, passing knowledge only to trusted apprentices through whispered instructions and careful demonstrations. But the guild's power went deeper than training, and what they demanded from their members would shock anyone who thought medieval craftsmanship was simple. The guild set prices, controlled quality, and most importantly, they decided who could be trusted with the ultimate responsibility of making keys for locks they'd never seen. A locksmith's reputation wasn't built on the locks he made, but on the keys that worked perfectly on the first try. One failed key could mean a ruined reputation, and in some cases accusations of deliberate sabotage. The guild also maintained what they called the Register of Patterns, a closely guarded collection of lock mechanisms and key profiles that served as a master reference. Only full guild members could access this knowledge, and copying these patterns without permission was punishable by expulsion and public shame. Yet even with all this regulation, the real test came when a merchant arrived at the workshop door, carrying nothing but a small block of wax. Picture this scene. A merchant from Canterbury arrives at a blacksmith's workshop in York, carrying nothing but a small block of beeswax. Inside that wax is the perfect impression of a lock mechanism, 60 miles away. This was the medieval locksmith's most crucial tool, the wax impression, and creating a usable one required extraordinary skill that most people never realized existed. The lock owner would heat the wax until it was soft, but not liquid, then carefully press it into the lock mechanism. Too hot, and the wax would run into crevices and create false impressions. Too cold, and it wouldn't capture the precise depths and angles needed. The wax had to capture not just the basic shape, but the exact spacing of each tumbler, the precise depth of each cut, and the subtle variations that made each lock unique. The best impressions were made with a mixture of beeswax and pine resin, heated over a small brazier until it reached the perfect consistency. Master locksmiths could tell by touch alone when the wax was ready. They would test it by pressing their thumb into a small sample, checking for the right amount of give and firmness. But even perfect wax meant nothing without the next crucial step, and this is where most attempts at keymaking failed completely. Now comes the real mystery. How did a blacksmith translate a wax impression into a working key? The process began with careful measurement, using tools that seem almost primitive by modern standards. Calipers made of iron, measuring sticks marked with precise notches, and small metal gauges that could determine depths to within a hair's breadth. The locksmith would study the wax impression under the best light available, usually near a window during daylight hours or beside multiple candles at night. First came the outline. Using a thin iron stylus, the locksmith would trace the exact shape of the key onto a piece of soft iron, or steel. This outline had to be perfect because any deviation would mean a key that wouldn't even enter the lock. Next came the critical measurements. Each notch, each ridge, each subtle curve had to be measured and marked. The locksmith used a system of tiny scratches and dots on the metal to mark where cuts needed to be made and how deep they should go. But here's where the real skill showed itself. A master locksmith could look at a wax impression and instantly know which cuts were structural and which were merely decorative wear from years of use. The forging process itself was an art form that took years to master. The locksmith would heat a bar of iron or steel in the forge until it glowed orange hot, then begin the delicate work of shaping. Unlike making horseshoes or farming tools, keymaking required precise, controlled hammer strokes. Too heavy a blow could deform the entire key. too light, and the metal wouldn't take the proper shape. The locksmith used a variety of specialized hammers, some no bigger than a thumb, to create the intricate teeth and ridges that would eventually align with the lock's mechanism. As each section took shape, the metal would be reheated and the process continued. But one wrong move could ruin hours of careful work. What made this process even more remarkable was that medieval locksmiths had to account for the variations in different lock mechanisms. A lock made in Germany used different spacing than one made in France. English locks had their own particular style, and even within regions, individual craftsmen had signature techniques that affected how keys needed to be cut. Master locksmiths kept mental catalogues of these variations, learned through decades of experience, and passed down through generations of guild teaching. They could look at a wax impression and immediately know not just what kind of lock it came from, but often which region and sometimes even which specific lockmaker had created the original mechanism. The social implications of this skill were enormous. In a world where most people couldn't read or write, the locksmith who could create keys from impressions held a kind of magical status. Nobles trusted them with access to their most valuable possessions. Merchants relied on them to protect their life's earnings. Even the church depended on skilled locksmiths to secure reliquaries, treasury boxes, and sacred spaces. This trust came with tremendous responsibility, because a locksmith who could make keys could theoretically make unauthorized copies. Guild oaths included specific pledges never to create duplicate keys without explicit permission from the lock's owner. For the wealthy, commissioning a new lock and key was a significant investment. A nobleman might pay the equivalent of a skilled craftsman's monthly wages for a single high-quality lock with its matching key. The lock itself would be installed by specialists, often the same craftsmen who had forged it, ensuring perfect alignment and smooth operation. But for those who needed replacement keys or additional copies, the wax impression system offered a more economical solution. Instead of transporting the entire lock or hiring the locksmith to travel long distances, a simple wax impression could be carried by any trusted messenger. The process wasn't without its risks and failures. Weather could ruin a wax impression during long journeys. Heat from summer sun could distort the crucial measurements, while winter cold could make the wax brittle and prone to cracking. Skilled messengers learned to pack wax impressions in specially designed boxes, often lined with cloth and sealed against moisture. Some even carried multiple impressions of the same lock, knowing that one might be damaged during transport. When an impression arrived damaged or unclear, the locksmith faced a dilemma: attempt to work with imperfect information or refuse the job entirely. Failed keys were more than just inconvenient. They could be catastrophic. A merchant locked out of his strongbox during market day could lose crucial business opportunities. A monastery unable to access its treasury might be unable to pay for essential supplies. In extreme cases, failed keys led to expensive and time-consuming lock replacements, with all the security risks that entailed. Some wealthy customers insisted on testing new keys immediately, sending trusted servants back to verify that each key worked perfectly before making final payment. The reputation system among medieval locksmiths was unforgiving. Word of mouth traveled quickly through merchant networks and noble circles. A locksmith who consistently produced working keys on the first attempt could build a client base spanning multiple kingdoms. Those who failed too often found themselves relegated to simple metalwork. Their dreams of mastering the lock and key trade effectively ended. Guild records from the 15th century show that successful key making from impressions was one of the final tests required for advancement to master status. Class differences shaped every aspect of the key-making process. Wealthy nobles could afford multiple attempts if the first key failed. They could pay for the finest materials, the most skilled craftsmen, and the most secure transport for their wax impressions. Poor merchants and small landowners had to make difficult choices. Some risked using inferior wax or less skilled locksmiths to save money. Others pooled resources with neighbors, commissioning multiple keys from a single impression to share the costs. Parish churches sometimes commissioned keys for their entire community, creating a single secure space that could be accessed by trusted leaders when needed. The church played a special role in medieval lock and key culture. Monasteries often housed the most skilled metalworkers, including locksmiths who combined technical expertise with religious devotion. These monk craftsmen were considered particularly trustworthy because their religious vows supposedly prevented them from creating unauthorized duplicates or using their skills for personal gain. Wealthy patrons often commissioned locks from monastery workshops specifically because they trusted the moral character of religious craftsmen more than secular guild members. Medieval law addressed the complexities of keymaking with surprising detail. City ordinances specified penalties for unauthorized key duplication, often including hefty fines and possible banishment from the guild. Contract law required locksmiths to guarantee their work, promising replacement keys or refunds if their craftsmanship failed. Some regions even required locksmiths to maintain detailed records of every key they made, including the name of the customer and the purpose of the lock. These records served both as quality control measures and as evidence in legal disputes over property access. The technical challenges of working from wax impressions pushed medieval metalworking to its limits. Locksmiths developed specialized tools for the precise work that keymaking required: tiny files for creating exact notch depths, specialized tongs for holding small pieces during heating, and even primitive measuring devices that could gauge angles and curves with remarkable accuracy. The forge itself had to be carefully controlled, with different areas maintained at specific temperatures for different stages of the keymaking process. Master craftsmen could tell by the color of the glowing metal exactly when it was ready for each operation. Quality control in medieval keymaking relied heavily on testing and refinement. A locksmith would typically create a rough version of the key first, testing it against the wax impression to identify any areas that needed adjustment. This rough key would be refined through careful filing and additional heating until it matched the impression exactly. Only then would the final finishing work begin, smoothing edges, adding decorative elements if requested, and ensuring that the key would operate smoothly in its intended lock. The entire process from wax impression to finished key could take anywhere from several hours to several days, depending on the complexity of the mechanism. Innovation in medieval lock and key technology often came from the challenges of working with impressions. Locksmiths developed new techniques for reading subtle details in wax, created more efficient methods for translating measurements, and invented specialized tools that made precision work easier. Some craftsmen experimented with different metal alloys, seeking combinations that would be strong enough for daily use, but soft enough to be precisely shaped. The constant pressure to create perfect keys from imperfect impressions drove continuous improvement in both tools and techniques. The international nature of medieval trade meant that locksmiths often worked with impression styles they had never seen before. A Flemish merchant might bring a wax impression from a Venetian lock, requiring the local craftsman to decode an entirely foreign mechanical system. This challenge led to informal networks of knowledge sharing among locksmiths, with guild members corresponding across long distances to share information about different regional lock styles and keymaking techniques. Master craftsmen who could successfully work with foreign impressions were highly valued and could command premium prices for their services. Regional variations in lock mechanisms reflected broader cultural differences in medieval society. Germanic locks favored complex internal mechanisms with multiple security features. French locksmiths were known for elegant designs that combined security with aesthetic appeal. English locks often incorporated features designed to prevent picking or unauthorized opening. Italian mechanisms frequently included clever false pathways that would trap incorrect keys. A truly skilled locksmith needed to understand not just the technical aspects of these different systems, but the cultural values and security concerns that had shaped their development. The medieval keymaking tradition established principles that influenced security technology for centuries. The concept of creating precise duplicates from detailed impressions became the foundation for modern key-cutting techniques. The guild system of apprenticeship and quality control evolved into professional licensing and certification programs. Even the basic tools and techniques used by medieval locksmiths remained virtually unchanged until the Industrial Revolution introduced mechanized production methods. The careful balance between security and accessibility that medieval craftsmen achieved in their locks and keys continues to influence modern security design. Understanding how medieval blacksmiths made keys without breaking into houses reveals a world of extraordinary skill, complex social relationships, and innovative problem-solving. These craftsmen developed techniques that seem almost impossible by modern standards, creating perfect keys from nothing more than wax impressions and decades of accumulated knowledge. Their work required not just technical expertise, but deep understanding of human nature, social hierarchies, and the delicate balance between security and access that defined medieval life. The next time you slip a key into a lock, remember the medieval locksmiths who mastered this art centuries ago. They worked without electric tools, without precise measuring instruments, without even the ability to see the locks their keys were meant to open, yet they created security systems so effective that their basic principles still protect our homes, offices, and possessions today. Their legacy lives on not just in the keys we carry, but in the fundamental understanding that true security comes from the perfect marriage of technical skill and absolute trust. If you enjoy the hidden sides of medieval life, hit subscribe and give this video a like.